I have this friend who always jokes about being a fi. This is important for later. I think it makes her feel better. She was abandoned, and now like 3 or 4, and passed around different foster homes until she turned 18. So for as long as I've known her, she's called herself a changeling. Like I said, I think it makes her feel better to say she's a changeling than to wonder why so many people abandon her. And to be honest, she could be a fi. She's got these ears that look pointed like an elf if you see them from the right angle. Her eyes, her face in general really, look exactly like old paintings and drawings you see of fi. Everything is slanted slightly upwards, eyes that are just a little too big. Human-like features where all the proportions are a little off, kind of towing the line between ethereal and creepy. It's hard to describe her in a way that makes sense, but look up old paintings of the fi, a dirty blonde hair, and you've got the image right. She's pretty, in an otherworldly kind of way. She's also really passionate about nature and conservation and stuff like that. We don't take her into certain stores because she gets truly pissed when she sees fake plants. That's when her ears look the most pointed. Her blue eyes melt into these deep pools of silver and green, and she looks just a little bit evil. That's when it's easiest to believe she really might be a fi. Anyway, the reason this is important is because for my birthday last year she gifted me a terrarium. It's gorgeous. A giant glass jar with a massive wooden cork. When I say giant, I really mean giants. It's almost too big for me to wrap my arms around it. The terrarium is a work of art, designed to look exactly like a little valley with trees and a river flowing through it. And there are no fake plants. Everything in it is real and growing. The most magical looking part is this purple door, nestled at the bottom of one of the little hills. Just over the water, it has a little band of burnished gold that runs around the length of it, and it looks strangely weathered, as if it's been standing there in that terrarium for a long time. And it's not just that the door looks old. It truly looks like it's been standing in that terrarium since the dawn of time. You can see little areas where the wood was chipping and someone repaired it. Some of the planks on the door even look newer than others, like slats were replaced one at a time, before all the plants started growing and blooming. The door was the most interesting part of the terrarium. The rest of it was pretty. It was just a bit barren. Initially, the inside of the jar had sloping hills made out of white and green stones. There were 2 hills that sloped down to a small pool of water in the center. On one side of the terrarium was the little purple door, and a crudely carved wooden mushroom next to it. Just below the door rests a little wooden log, covered in moss, that leads from one bank to the other. When I first got it, there were a few scraggly little ferns growing on the edge of the rocks, near the top of the jar, and some patches of moss on the otherwise barren rocks. But over the weeks, a small world bloomed to life inside the terrarium. There would be long days filled with mist that coated the inside, completely hiding it from the outside world. And the mist would drip away, and the inside of the jar would be a completely different world. Every time. It was a real trust the process experience, watching the scraggly little plants slowly take over the jar. But after a few short months, it became a tiny ecosystem. The moss had stretched across the rocks, creating a decadent green slope that ran the length of the jar, tipping up and down, and eventually dropping off into the water. The water turned a rich blue, like the deepest river, and in the center of the pool where there had originally just been this strange little bar, now a water lily is growing. When she first gave it to me, I thought the door had green ivy painted on it, but as I studied it each day, my face pressed against the glass like a child gazing through the window of a candy store, I realized it had real, tiny ivy growing on it. The ivy still baffles me. I can't tell where it's growing from. It's just there. She gave it to me at my bowling alley birthday party, and I had to run the beautiful terrarium out to my car in the middle of my party, because I was so worried someone would shatter it, or steal it. I sweated over it all night. Every time I bowled, I felt the cold hand of dread tightening my muscles, as I worried over the special gift. She might have planned all that, just so she could beat me at bowling. When I finally got the gift home, I carried it gently inside, careful to not bump anything out of place, and placed it in my bedroom on the desk that faces my bed. I put a lamp over it, so I would be able to see it better while I worked on my projects. Snapped a picture and sent it to her. As I got in bed that night, I was certain I heard the distant sound of laughter, carried on some wind I couldn't feel across a very long distance. But that didn't make any sense, so I ignored it. I fell asleep, and woke up the next morning feeling as if I had barely closed my eyes. I stumbled through the day, thinking only about the beautiful terrarium that I couldn't wait to study further when I got home from work. The day moved slowly. I worried that I would get in trouble for spacing out, but I managed to get home without getting snapped at too many times. I finally stumbled through the door and sat reverently in front of the glass container. That was how most of my days went for the first month or two. Then I guess I got used to having it around, and it stopped consuming my thoughts so much. I would still sit in front of it each night when I got home, and take a look each morning before I left. But as the weeks wore on, the terrarium became slightly less of an obsession, and more of a prized pet. I showed it off constantly, to anyone who was willing to step foot in my apartment. I regaled them with stories about every little change, and the progression the lily was making, to how much the moss on the log had grown since I got it. Over time, and after I had shown the terrarium to everyone who would look at it, I stopped talking about it quite so much. But I continued to study it carefully. One morning, after a strange night of scattered dreams and vague uneasiness, I woke to find that the door had been scraped open very slightly. There was a small scar in the moss that blanketed the floor beneath the door, showing that the door had clearly been creaked open and back shut. I stared in amazement for so long I wound up being late for work. But it was clear that the little door in the hillside had been moved open, as if it rested on hinges, and then back shut. It was all I could think about all day. When I got home later that night, the scar in the moss was gone, and I swear there was a little triangle of moss that was a brighter shade of green, as if it was new. After that I went back to studying the jar obsessively. Every single day, I would sit beside the desk with the lamp on, studying every inch of the jar. It literally consumed my thoughts. It's not just that it was all I thought about. It was the only thing I wanted to think about. When I would see my friends, I always got a little frustrated if they didn't want to talk about the terrarium. It felt like I had this amazing mystery sitting right across from my bed. I couldn't understand how anything could be more interesting to talk about. After another few weeks, I started having these weird dreams. Every single night. Every night I was traveling through this forest. Some nights there was firelight in the trees. Comforting and beautiful. Laughter would float on the breeze. Gentle and uplifting. Other nights, it was dark and a strange presence almost seemed to be hunting me. I couldn't tell much about the place from my dreams, except that the woods were dense and full of plants I didn't quite recognize. On the nights when I dreamed of firelight, I traveled slowly under the vague sensation that I was traveling with a party. It felt safe, nice, even like I was camping with friends. On the other nights, I ran knowing someone or something, or a group of someones and somethings, was hunting me. I would sprint through the dark forest as screeches and laughter followed me, urging me to move even faster to get to safety. I never saw who or what chased me, but I could feel their sharp eyes, and sometimes I thought I saw teeth gleaming at me from the darkness. But every night, I traveled. When I woke, I felt tired and lethargic, my muscles sore and stiff as if I really had been walking all night long. But even so, I looked forward to my dreams. There was something oddly enticing about the forest. The laughter, and mostly unjustified as I know, and as odd as it sounds, even the fear was tantalizing. It was like waking up with this amazing taste in my mouth. That slowly faded as the day went on. And to be honest, I really wanted to see what lay at the end of it. I've never had a dream that followed a continuous storyline like that before, and I wanted to know what was going to happen. Then one night the dream changed. I was still moving through the forest, but it wasn't as dense as it had been in previous nights. There was a more clear path in front of me, and soft daylight was pouring in through the branches of the trees. I walked slowly, reverently, as if I was in a sacred space, until I came to a strange door. It was green and covered in small purple ivy that wove across the door in mesmerizing patterns. I stood in front of the door as if frozen, until a lilting, laughing voice from behind me said, "Open it," and I woke up. There was that cold hand of dread again, tracing familiar patterns up and down my spine as I lay in bed. Something felt off. Suddenly, after weeks of not worrying about it, I felt like there was some kind of malicious energy in my dreams. It had clearly been leading me somewhere, and I wasn't sure if I was okay with that. I know this is going to sound strange, but I was scared to go to sleep again after that. All day, I felt cold dread gently running up and down my back, reminding me what waited for me after work. After I got home from work that day, I made myself as busy as I could, getting every task done that I possibly could. I cleaned my kitchen and bathroom, did all my dirty laundry, cleaned out my car, and then settled into bed around 1 a.m. with a book. I know myself pretty well, and if I fall asleep after 1 in the morning, I don't dream. Maybe there's not enough time for me to go into REM or something, but I swear I don't ever dream if I fall asleep past 1 a.m. I'm not sure exactly what time I passed out, but I remember glancing sleepily at the clock and seeing that it was after 3 in the morning. Not long before the book I was slogging through toppled from my hands to the floor, and I fell into a deep sleep. I shouldn't have dreamed, but I did. It was a short dream. My own hand reached out, as laughter from invisible voices all around me reached a nearly frenzied pitch. It was so loud that I could feel it flooding through every part of me. The laughter became so loud, so aggressive almost, that I began to feel panic flooding me. I had to get out of there. I pushed on the door. It resisted at first, but I pushed harder, wanting escape, and it slowly swung open. I was up and out of bed before I was even fully awake, lurching towards the terrarium on my desk with an absolute certainty that the tiny purple door would be pushed open. But it wasn't. The door sat in the same position it was always in, nestled against the mossy little hill. There were no signs of movement. I stood there panting and clutching my chest, and honestly feeling like a real idiot. I was just about ready to leave for work when I realized I had missed something. There, so small that I could barely see it, and only in the right light, with tiny little footprints in the bed of moss. They lead from the door to the fallen log. Then they stopped. I studied the little footprints for a long time, but I forced myself to leave for work. I pushed it out of my mind and tried to focus on the things I had to do at work. But I was even more exhausted than usual, and all my thoughts seemed to lead me back to those tiny little footprints. When I finally got home that day, the little footprints were gone just like I had expected them to be. When I noticed that the flower had begun to bloom, unfurling gentle white petals to the sky. You might think I'm crazy, but I really wanted to believe that I was just stressed from work. So I put it out of my mind. The lily continued to grow, unfurling petal after petal, and the weird dream stopped after that. The terrarium became just another thing in my house. A very cool thing, to be fair, but just another thing. I know this is going to sound weird, but up to that point, with the dreams and all the weird changes, I had been starting to feel kind of scared of the terrarium. And the dreams stopped, and all of a sudden, I forgot all of that. About 6 months passed, and a few weeks ago things started getting weird again. The first thing I noticed was that the door had been moved again. A small scrape in the moss showing that it had been pushed open a few inches. There were little footsteps leading away from the door, though they trailed off at the water. I took a picture to send to the friend who had given it to me, but I couldn't find the message thread where we had been talking. I told myself I would look for it later and left for work, but I never did find that message thread. I went into my contacts list to text her directly, and I couldn't remember her name. It feels so weird, because I absolutely could have sworn we went to high school together, but it's like there's a blank space where my memories of her should be. No face, no name, just a few features and a very clear memory of the way she smiled when she handed me the terrarium. When I got up the next morning, there were even more footsteps, as if a group of tiny people had been running all over the inside of the jar. Feeling officially creeped out, I texted my best friend Miles, who had been at the party. Me, hey man, do you know who gave me the terrarium last year for my birthday? Miles, LOL, what? Me, what? Miles, DK, I don't remember. I thought you got it from a family member or something. Me, what? No, I got it from one of our friends. I just don't remember who. Miles, some friend you are. Remind me to never pour us into a project for you all. Me, no dude, fucking listen to me. I distinctly remember that a female friend of ours from high school gave it to me. she PRTY. But I can't put my finger on her name. It's like I remembered her up until last week. Then I just lost it. Miles, we apparently remember high school differently. I remember us not being cool enough to hang out with girls. I gave up at that point. Miles usually has a pretty good memory, so I thought for sure he would remember, but I didn't have the patience to try and get him to recall it. I reached out to a few other people who were at the party, but none of them remembered me getting the terrarium that night. I also tried describing our friend, but no one recognized the description. And in the meantime, there are more footsteps in the terrarium every day. The worst part is that I had another dream last night. An impossibly tall man, his proportions all wrong, leaning down to look through a very small door. He reached his hand through the door and it seemed to stretch for miles. He looked at me and said, The portal you've opened is too small. Little mortal one. He pulled his hand back and I saw ferns lace through his fingers. He tapped me on the chest and I felt bones shattering at his touch as he said, I can make another. Something told me he meant me. I'm not sure what that means, but I know it's true. I woke up and saw that the door was open. It was the only thing I could see through the mist clouding the glass. But there was one clear spot in the glass that showed me the door standing wide open. A clear spot in the shape of a large hand. An asteroid was supposed to hit Earth on Friday, March 7th, 2025, at 12:27 MET. I don't know much about the people in power or why they decide to keep events like this hidden from the public. I am here to tell you about the boy who stopped it. His name was Noah. I never knew his last name. He, like me, was 18 years old. Noah's favorite TV show was The Walking Dead. He was obsessed with BioShock and excited for The Last of Us Season 2. Inside clinical white walls. I grew up with him in a facility for teenage superheroes. It's perfectly normal for a 10-year-old to think he has superpowers. When I was 10, I was eating spaghetti when a suited man stepped inside my house and shot my mother dead. The man had an excuse. Apparently, I was already doing irreparable harm to her with my radioactive energy, and she was 3 weeks from suffering an aneurysm. He held out his hand, wore a wide smile, and said, Did you know you have superpowers, kid? I did not know I had superpowers, but he explained it in ways I both did and didn't understand. He told me babies born into 2007 had a certain genetic mutation inside them, an evolutionary gene which caused psychic phenomena. I asked how that related to radioactive energy, and he just grinned and told me I was a funny kid. I was taken to a top-secret facility, where I would learn to harness my awakening abilities. The facility had been built specifically for us, to build a group of people with psychic phenomena to save the planet from threats. I had grown up loving superheroes, so this was a dream come true. I didn't even realize I was slowly killing my mother. The facility would be a new start for me, and like all of my favorite teen superheroes, I could grow up just like them and save the world. Now, that is what I thought, because I was 10 years old. I could barely even register my mother being shot dead. The facility wasn't exactly a 5-star experience, but for a new Earth and kid who was definitely fucking traumatized, I didn't complain. It's not like we were completely cut off from the rest of the world. We could watch TV, and there was a games console in the rec room. There were exactly 20 of us, and all of us had had the exact same experience. A man had walked into our home, murdered our parents, and told us we had superpowers. I thought I could tolerate the daily tests. Every day after lunch, we would be individually taken inside a room. They weren't so bad at first. I was asked questions, and I had to answer them. They quickly moved to physical tests, telling me to run on an exercise bike, or complete a math test. I expected something more akin to actually testing my superpowers. I still didn't know what my power was. The man wearing the white lab coat told me I was a level 5 for psychic phenomena, but I still felt the same. I tried to move things with my mind, and to into other people's minds, but I felt nothing. Yes, the people at the facility assured me I was coming into my powers, but I felt like an idiot. One test in particular twisted my body into knots, and I couldn't stop the scream ripping from my mouth, my body jerking, forming an arch, and slamming back down. But I was excited. This was the first test that felt real. My nose was bleeding, and my body was aching. But for the first time since I arrived, I could finally feel it. My ability, running through my veins, blooming inside me. I still laughed, forcing my chest to breathe, my lungs to inhale oxygen. Despite my screams, gloved hands gently held me down, but I was shaking with excitement. I was a superhero. I was going to save the world. 8 years later, we got the first call. I was violently pulled out of my bed and dragged downstairs where we were told to stand in a line. A man with a gun marching up and down. His name was Callan, and sometimes he offered me sour candies. Callan wasn't nearly as cold as he tried to make out. When we were kids, he would pull faces at us to make us laugh. As teens, he called us little brats. That morning, however, Callan was significantly pale in the cheeks. I wasn't supposed to eavesdrop on adult conversation, but these soldiers were loud. Earthquake and tsunami. Nankai Trough. It's predicted to be over a 10. One soldier muttered to another. I think that's what he said. At least. Something slimy crept up my throat when even the hard-faced soldiers started cursing. Noah, who was standing next to me, me. His lips curled into a smirk. I had known him since my first day. I broke down in front of him, and he was kind enough to offer me a snuggled candy bar. This is what we're here for, right? He whispered. You? A soldier barking orders at a stock in front of a small girl. Elizabeth. I heard her power was super strength. Elizabeth had never actually shown us. Using our abilities was a strict no outside the testing rooms. Elizabeth was a bitch. I don't mean that in a shitty way. I mean she was the facility's answer to a mean girl. As a child, Elizabeth bragged that she was the most powerful, and also pushed me into the girls' shower rooms. For zero reason other than gathering her clique of equally annoying friends, and laughing at me. As a teenager, she was somehow worse, extremely loud, and actively picked on newbies. Noah shot me a look, rolling his eyes. I can't say I was happy that Elizabeth had the fate of the world on her shoulders. I was super salty as she turned to the rest of us and mockingly saluted. Before being pulled away, the last thing I saw was her bobbing orange ponytail. She was already demanding to sit in the front seat of an awaiting Hummer. As you all know, or don't know since all of this is away from the public eye, Elizabeth saved you. She stopped the earthquake. I wasn't sure how, but I had an idea, and Noah had a fun imagination. When I got back to our room, he was loudly reenacting the moment Elizabeth stopped the earthquake from happening. Balanced on his bed, his arms spread out, pretending his blankets and sheets were the quivering earth beneath her feet. He mocked her voice, laughing. I've stopped you now. His audience were rolling their eyes, but smiling. Noah did a great impression of her, which was funny, because Elizabeth regularly mimicked his lisp to make everyone laugh. We all waited in anticipation for the queen bee to return. I was secretly dreading it. I had a feeling she was going to keep us all up all night, sneaking into the boys' dorm with the girls, and going on and on and on and on and on until I threw a pillow at the head. Still, though, I was excited to hear about her very first mission to save the world. But Elizabeth never came back. Apparently, she had joined a senior team, consisting of older high school kids. I thought, good for her, I guess. But I did get a little emotional waking past her room. As frustrating as she was, Elizabeth was part of our group. I didn't like that she had left her stuffed teddy on her bed. She had been clutching it the day she was dragged into the facility at 10 years old. Her eyes raw from crying, almost hollow. I remember she was staring forward like she wasn't sure where she was going. When she opened up to the rest of us, Elizabeth told us her dad had been shot in the head, and she was taken away. Then she was separated from her little brother, who was put into a van. Elizabeth wore a brave face. I know it's for my own good, she said with a wide smile, but her lips were always curved a little too much, like she was planning to one day use her powers against the ones who took her. My roommate, however, was glad and maybe a little jealous Elizabeth was gone. She's a big shot now. Noah rolled his eyes, nudging me in the cafeteria line at breakfast. I was trying to choose between oatmeal or toast. Noah picked for me, grabbing me a bowl of oatmeal and dumping it on my plate. I had a feeling his ability was mind reading, because he knew exactly what I was thinking about. Of course she's not coming back. He scoffed through a mouthful of unidentified meat. Noah's hair was growing over his eyes. I told him to cut it, but he said it made him look cool. I, however, thought it looks like one of my mom's photos as a teenager. Lizzie's probably joined some super secretive superhero team. He took the opportunity to once again mimic her voice. He was right. I was overthinking. The following week, we got another call. Growing up, I had come to realize when the bright yellow rotary telephone started to ring. It wasn't a good thing. This time the woman answering it pewed everywhere. Asteroid. That's all I heard when usually empty hallways began to fill with soldiers. The information from the call spread quickly, and I had never seen grown soldiers cry before. The woman who answered the phone was still sitting on clinical white tiles, her head in her hands. Throughout my time at the facility, our guards maintained a cold, authoritative tone, but I could see it cracking. Some turned on each other. Others found comfort in each other. But they were all screaming the same thing. A space rock twice the size of Chickleboot. The asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs is going to strike the Indian Ocean on March 7th at exactly 12:27 a.m. An extinction level event. Again, none of this information was shared outside the facility. Not even world leaders, scientists, astronauts. Per protocol, the first people who heard about potential world-ending disasters were us. At the time, I guess they were using psychic phenomena to predict these events. As usual, 19 of us marched into the briefing room and stood in a line. This time, Noah was pulled from the line, his hand slipping from mine. I didn't even realize he was holding my hand until his clammy fingers were being yanked away. Noah looked scared, and I think he was excited. He shot me a sickly smile. I'm going to send it flying back into space. He tapped his temple with a grin. With my telekinesis, I figured in the testing rooms my roommate really had mastered his superpowers. It's not like he told me about his ability, which twisted my gut. Telekinesis was huge, but I also understood his preference to keep his superpower from the rest of us. I watched my Noah jump into an awaiting car, shooting me one last grin. See you on the other side, he yelled. I didn't realize until he was gone that I didn't want Noah to join some top-secret organization filled with powerful older kids. I went to bed feeling sick. I was yet to fully come into my ability. I didn't even know what it was. I kept wondering if I was a mistake. Maybe my recruitment was an error. Yes, I admit. I was jealous of my roommate, but Noah would be jealous of me now. The man who murdered my mother told me I was extraordinary, and I would be fulfilling a purpose. And I still felt like a regular, ordinary teenager. I was aware of several kids waiting for the asteroid to pass, but I was too tired. I woke the next morning to the adults cheering. He did it. Noah saved us. I could already imagine how fucking excited he'd be. I was excited for him. I completely forgot the #1 rule, to not leave your room until after 9. I jumped out of bed, excited to share my exhilaration with the other kids. Noah had saved us. 2 of the girls, Serena and Beth, were definitely awake. I could hear them excitedly chatting to each other. I pushed open my door, stepping into what we had called the lonely hallway since we were kids because it had a dead end. Noah, of course, used it as his prime hiding place during hide and seek. There were so many storage rooms to explore, it was a hide and seek paradise. Something stopped me in my tracks. Though, I left the comfort of my room. It was the sudden stink of iron that caught me off guard. I was so used to the hallway smelling like bleach mixed with oatmeal drifting from the cafeteria. But this was stronger, biting into my nose and throat. I didn't realize I was still barefoot until I was standing in something thick and warm, trickling under my feet. Something slimy crept up my throat, my nerve endings on fire. Blood. A red streak trailed across clinical white tiles. The lonely hallway stretched all the way to the other side of the facility, and I found myself following the long, bloody smear winding through the sterile white. I started to run, my heart in my throat, when I heard slapping sounds. The smears of red became thicker, darker, until I was following a flowing red river down white. When the slapping noises stopped, I looked up. Noah slumped on the floor, his throat opened up, eyes still wide, lips frozen in a grin. That's what the slapping noises were, the sound of his body being used. Like a fucking mop, smearing blood. The man carrying him held him like a trophy, fingers entwined in my roommate's bad haircut. The smear of blood wasn't accidental. It was purposeful. Noah's blood was supposed to run, to trickle all the way down the lonely hallway. The soldier dragging him looked gleeful, almost drunk. When he dropped to his knees, giggling into the floor, muttering about offerings and how grateful he was, how much he respected them, I turned around and walked back to my room, half aware of Noah's blood still slick between my toes. It truly hit me when I climbed into bed and let myself scream. I was so fucking scared. Noah wasn't a superhero. He was an offering. We don't have abilities. We're not genetically mutated children with psychic phenomena. We are sacrifices offered to stop potential world-ending disasters. Just like Elizabeth, whose body I found in a waste chute. Her body twisted like a pretzel, only recognizable from her hair. I was dragged from my room that same night. They strapped me down under intense white light, held a scalpel to my throat, and forced me to say it was a dream, that I imagined it. If not, I would be the next sacrifice. So I did. I played along. I told them I imagined it. We got another call a week later. March 14th. The phone kept ringing and ringing until someone answered it. The soldier was Callan. He was calm, nodding, saying, "I'll let them know." And he dropped the receiver, pulled out his knife, and slit his throat. I don't know what it is this time, but it was bad enough for one soldier to tear out his eyes. The people who kidnapped me as a child and turned me into a sacrifice started to go insane, quitting their jobs, screaming, running around, trying to force their way out of the steel doors locking us inside. I used the opportunity to gather the others and get the fuck out of there. The security guards usually standing in front of our rooms were gone. I saw one of them trying to stick the barrel of his gun down his throat. The thing about the facility is that the people running it always used the same threat against us. If you go outside, you'll hurt people, and it will be your fault. But now we know the truth, we're nothing more than glorified sacrifices, offered up to satisfy something far greater than us. If you tell a group of traumatized children they're superheroes enough times, they'll believe it. We escaped several days ago. Whatever was said on that call shook them enough to quit their jobs and call their families. The usually padlocked doors leading to the outside world were open, so we took the opportunity and ran. I had never seen the complete breakdown of a person before, and now I was seeing it on a massive scale. These people were crying, screaming, and begging each other for inside information. I found it hard to believe they had the audacity to want to live, to survive whatever is coming, when they had brutally sacrificed my friends with not an ounce of empathy. I hope they all rot. Currently, we are in hiding, and I'm terrified these people are desperate enough to hunt us down. Will they kidnap more kids? Or come after us? I don't know what's coming, and I wish you luck in surviving whatever was on that phone call, whether that's today, tomorrow, or sometime in the future. Noemi Elizabeth saved you once and then twice. I'm sorry, but we can't save you this time.